Welcome to another episode of Athens and Jerusalem. Let's begin where we can't escape. Let's begin with Logos.
Now, I would say that this openness, this being in the world, this referring to the world, to objects in the world, what I would like to call self-transcendence, this is disappearing as soon as you project a human being into a lower dimension than its own dimension.
Point of the V goes up to the nuclear explosion that created it.
Tell me this, Dr. Oppenheimer. Do you ever become frightened at what you're finding out here in this area that can't be measured in either time or space?
You see, that's a real point.
Do not be afraid. Open your hearts, open up your hearts.
Open up your hearts to Athens and Jerusalem, the infants of our culture, united, independent, polarized, and even bloody. Athens, the cradle of wisdom and rationality. Jerusalem, the cradle of faith and spirituality. In this podcast, we look at reunion. Could reason be more than modern secular skepticism? And could spirituality be more than belief? Yes, welcome to this first Athens and Jerusalem podcast. My name is Knut Ove Esøy. Together with me is Cameron Namdar and Stephen Phelps. I'm a philosopher from Norway, living in Oslo. And Cameron, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. I'm Kamran from Sweden, Västerås, a little city in Sweden, and I'm in general terms an educationalist.
Yeah, and Stephen, you are actually in Portland?
Yes, I am living in Portland, Oregon, sunny Portland this week, and I have a cosmology background. And I am a part-time armchair philosopher.
Nice. I like the idea of armchairing philosophy. I think often we understand philosophy as something that is only for people with education, but I think philosophy is for everybody to.
Exactly. Sorry, I was just going to say that I think what also seems to unite us all is that we are amateurs. Now, in the original sense of the word, the word amateur is usually understood as someone who is not really good at something or is not, but originally the word amateur meant someone who actually loves something or what they're doing, and they're not doing it for reasons of earning money or something, but just because of the love of it. And so I think we are, yes, amateur armchair philosophers, and that's a great position to be in.
Yes, and I hope the listeners on this podcast, they also could have the same feeling of amateurship as
Yes.
we have when we are. So we hopefully we're gonna do some armchair philosophy with you all. And so why Athens and Jerusalem? What is this podcast all about, Cameron?
Well, I mean, I can just give my own personal angle as an educationalist, because working with schools and young people at schools, children at schools, you soon come to realize something that also research and statistics show, that young people in today's world, many of them are not very well. They are depressed or stressed or sort of have a general experience of emptiness in life. And this is usually explained in psychological terms, because I think that in our modern scientific approach, we sort of categorize everything that is not purely cognitive as psychological. And so this has been seen as some sort of a psychological crisis of the young people. But I think that there is something much deeper to this. And I think the reason why so many young people all over the world, especially in the Western world, are not feeling very well is not just because of the kind of obvious psychological reasons that have to do with their awareness of global threats or the way that their self-esteem is regulated by social media and things like that. But I think that there's a more general sort of sense of emptiness, if one can say so, a lack of true meaning and purpose, a lack of possibility of seeing one's life as something meaningful in existence, in relationship to existence. And I think we can see some very tragic examples of this. For instance, some time ago, this very loved and skilled and famous Swedish musician Avicii committed suicide. Someone who, by any standards of our times, was successful. He was successful. He was well off. He was financially well off. He was loved. He was popular. His music was appreciated. And yet, and this is what his family actually said, that the reason why he took his life at a young age was because he confronted existential issues to which he could not find answers. Yes. And I think that the fact that our educational system is mainly focusing on trying to get scientific knowledge, subject knowledge over to students, and not addressing issues that have to do with existential meaning or ethical issues or aesthetic matters. This is something which creates a sense of emptiness in young people's lives. And of course, this is not just this is not a problem of the school system, because this is only within school system, this is only a reflection of what is happening in society at large. I mean, and it's not only obviously young people who are feeling this emptiness and lack of meaning. I think this is a general sort of characteristic of the times in which we are living. And there's this paradoxality in our times that on the one hand, we have this unbelievable amount of knowledge and technology at our disposal, and then the knowledge, I think, is doubling currently at some unbelievable rate of every 12 hours or something like that. And yet, in contrast to that, and while of course all this knowledge and technology has brought us many blessings and has solved many of our problems, it has left many even traditional problems unsolved, such as poverty or war or the like. But it has also created some new ones. Maybe one of the most prominent one of them is the environmental and climate crisis that we're facing as humanity.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I think, Cameron, you are bringing up a lot of questions and a lot of different kind of possibilities of what we could talk about. So I think also Stephen would say something. But before, just because I think if this podcast could help people actually creating a language for our existential problems or our existential living, and helping people to bring forth new understandings or new concepts to help them to with the mind or their consciousness. I think that would be really really nice if we could do something like that. But and I also think that the education system, I'm not sure actually if that okay you said that we have a lot of knowledge into the school systems, but is it really knowledge or is it just information? I mean, in my philosophical background, I would say that one of the problem with the modern understanding of knowledge is that we are missing out wisdom, insight, these kind of questions, or this kind of thinking that is not it may not be part of the scientific knowledge, but it's still knowledge. Or then we have to broaden our understanding of science to so we could give wisdom a larger part of the school systems and also our language. So Stephen, what is your why Athens and Jerusalem?
Well, I share with both of you this sense that we are a civilization in a state of crisis. I believe this crisis, as much as it feels like a crisis of the present hour, of the present moment, and it is in a way, and what Kamran mentioned, these new statistics on the mental health of our youth is an example of where things seem to be taking a trend towards the worse. At the same time, the roots of this crisis can be seen going back historically, at least a few centuries. It's been a long time coming. And I think understanding something about the roots of the crisis, which we can call a crisis of meaning in the world, understanding something about the historical roots of this crisis can help us perhaps understand what we might do about it and how we might go forward. And I think the roots of this crisis have a lot to do with something which was a tremendous success for civilization, which has brought us incredibly forward in terms of material advancement. And I'm speaking of the scientific revolution, and I'm speaking of the Enlightenment, and this revolution in human thought that they both brought, a revolution and a revelation, really, of how the world works, based on understanding the world in physical terms, based on a way of understanding the world that breaks it into parts, that analyzes the pieces, that approximates the world as comprised of separate atoms. And that approximation has been so enormously successful, and it's brought the world forward so far in terms of our understanding and mastery of our physical environment. But there's, if you can say, a dark side of that tremendous success, which is this dissolution of a world which was once enchanted, which was once filled with interconnectivity, a meaning overarching everything, a meaning which was understood in very traditional theological terms as the providence of a loving God in the world that was responsible for the progress and movement of all things. That narrative has been undermined really fatally by this success of our understanding of the world in material terms, an understanding of the world as resolved and divided into parts. And so we're living in this world today, in a modern world, in which the traditional meanings have been drained out, in which our traditional narratives, particularly our traditional sacred narratives, have been undermined. And we're left with a world which we master to such an incredible degree, but a world in which we exist as separate entities fundamentally, separate from each other, just as atoms are fundamentally separate from other atoms. And it's a world that's fundamentally as well drained of overarching meaning. It's a world in which everything is explained by the immediate impact of forces. We see things in terms of causes and effects at a very, let's say, local level. And we don't see or recognize there being any trends on a much larger level, unless it's the trend of entropy, of everything running down, and finally of everything finally dying in the end, and everything becoming more disordered. So understanding, I think, something of the root of the present day crisis, which is a crisis of meaning, can help us ask the question: can we recover that meaning? Can we re-enchant the universe? It's having been so disenchanted by something which has been such a tremendous leap forward in human civilization, a tremendous leap forward in human consciousness, but at the same time, it has not come without its cost. And in trying to ask this question, how can we re-enchant the world? We realize at the same time that we can't do it by going backwards to old ways of thinking. We can't do it by returning to the theologies of the past, by returning to these narratives of the past. But we have to do it somehow by a rebirth of meaning and a rebirth of the magic of things, but in terms of the scientific understanding of the world that we've gained. And whether that comes through a re-understanding of what is science and what is a scientific method, or whether it comes through a re-understanding of what is spirit and what are these ultimate goods that have been described in traditional theological terms, is the question that lies before us. My personal suspicion is that it's more the latter than the former. It's more a matter of revisioning and re-understanding spirit and what we mean by spirit, what we mean by meaning and purpose. I don't think it is as much going to lie in the direction of finding a new way of doing science.
Thanks, Stephen. I follow you, but if I should try to how to rebirth or how to develop science, or maybe I could rather talk about truth, because I think the word truth, or what truth is a problem actually in our society, and especially in the intellectual academic society. I think we often, especially after the postmodernist area, there has been a lot of even some are just saying that knowledge and there's something that is created by is constructed by the human beings, and it's only a question of language. But I think if we should, I think we have to try to visualize or to feel what truth could be as a phenomena that is actually existing in the world, as something that exists. And if we try to, then maybe we could make truth actually something that is sacred and something that is mystical in some way, that is also it helps. I think that would, let's talk, if you said spirit, if you say soul, how is, do we dare to talk about human with soul or with a spirit today? And yeah, especially in the academic society, this is especially in Norway and Sweden, I guess it's very problematic to use words like this, because we are not able to defend the possibility of truth as something that actually exists, or the soul as something that exists by our scientific way of thinking.
Yeah, this problem of truth is in some way the real central problem of the present day, in which our traditional concept of truth let's say, prior to this great intellectual revolution of the last few centuries, is that truth was something that comes down from above. Truth is something which is given by, say, a prophet, or revealed by a sage. It's often present between the pages, in the pages of a book. It's something which has authoritative sources which cannot be challenged. And our closest approach to the truth would be going backwards in time to where that truth was, the moment when that truth was sent down or revealed. And so that gave us a kind of very essentialist, very backwards looking view of where the capital T truth could be found. But the process of the last few centuries, and this, in a way, destructive, corrosive, but at the same time revolutionary and wonderful process of humans' consciousness waking up to the realization that every human mind is capable of accessing reality. We all have this faculty within us of being able to understand reality, help to undermine the idea that there were unchallengeable sources of truth. That truth was in fact something that we can collaborate on approaching closer to, that through the scientific method we can build upon the truths that the previous generation discovered, and make truth something which is social, something which is progressive, and something which is forward-looking, so that our closest approach to the truth now is something which is in the future rather than in the past. But this also comes at the cost when you let go of the idea that there's only one single unchallengeable source of truth, and you realize that truth is something that we're collaboratively trying to approach. We come upon the seemingly intractable problem that different people have different ideas about how to pursue truth. And although we might be able to agree on a very rudimentary level of what a physical measurement is, and that gives the physical sciences a certain advantage, let's say, in collaboratively building models of reality, the moment you step outside the laboratory and into the real world, the world of people, the messy world of social relationships, the messy world of societies, the definitions, the baseline realities become much harder to find consensus around. And truth divides up then along different lines that don't necessarily converge. Truths that are in some ways tribal, or in some ways depending upon and deriving from innate and intrinsic just differences between people, how they think about the world. And that's a great challenge for us. If we wanted to go back to an earlier model of truth that's sort of something we all agree to, maybe that's not a possible future for us. Maybe the possible future is going to be a little bit messier. It's going to be something which involves a consultative process that invites and includes as many diverse perspectives as possible, that builds models of reality that are constantly open to critique and criticism, that can be revised as more information comes in, and that allows for the innate variations in human encounters with reality. I'm talking not about different sorts of sciences, different formulations, say, of the fundamental laws of physics, because those are areas where we have, I think, the greatest possibilities of coming to consensus about reality. I'm thinking more about the truths that, on the street matter the most to people. What's the meaning of existence? Why are we here? What's the best form of governing ourselves? What's the best way of managing economies? The really complicated problems that we actually deal with in the world. Are we, is it a possible future for us that there's a consensus around one right way of doing things, or are we going to have to find a stable equilibrium in a society that permits of diverse approaches? And that's something I think we haven't really solved. And there's huge tension because there are these, traditional groups that still are stuck on the idea that there is a single truth that everyone has to rally around. And if we can just convince everyone that this is the right way, then that's the solution. That's the way forward. That's the way, to solve the problems of the present hour. What we haven't yet figured out how to do as a society is go forward preserving diversity, but at the same time achieving a degree of unity and consensus.
Okay, so because I can follow you in one way, and then I think as long as human is human, we will never find the answers to the really huge or the deepest questions of existence. And I think we will always, and I think we need to search those questions. And I think we also need to search them in a way that we believe that there must be some kind of answer to them, that there exists some kind of truth in it. If not, there will be very difficult to have like a public discussions on those questions, because we could all just say that, but this is just my opinion, or this is my private opinion, and this is your private opinion. And then there will only be a lot of like 7 billion monologues, and we are not discussing anything. We are not participating in anything together. And I think we need to, if we are to have a public discussion on existential questions, I think we need to keep the possibility that truth could be existing, but we will never reach it. But maybe we could try to find out what is not true, and we could also try to find out what is not valid as truth. I think when I read like the old Viking wisdom, I can still find a lot of truth in those words of wisdoms, and I think there are some possibilities that the human being actually could try, or could. It's not only a question of math. Two adding 2 is 4, of course, and that would be it would always be 4, even though every human being was dead. Then this would still be, and I think we could also say that we don't know our future. That's also a truth for me, and it's an important truth. And to know that we are going to die, yes, it's a truth, and it's something that is important for us to understand and to live by. So I think we should try to differ between cultural particularities and universal truth. So we have to differ between that we know that this kind of knowledge or wisdom has arrived from the book from Athens, or the book from the Viking Age. Okay, but let's forget about the origin and start to ask the question: what is valid? What kind of claims are actually valid or not? And I think it is possible for human to feel, or to understand, to really understand that some claims are valid, even though they come from different cultures. Yeah,
that's a great point. Maybe one way to rephrase what I was saying is that we want to avoid two extremes. On the one extreme, as you point out, we want to avoid the completely unworkable future of there being 7 billion completely separate opinions that are all sovereign, and with there being no standard or of discriminating between different versions of what people think to be the truth. And on the other extreme, we want to avoid the kind of imposition of a monolithic conception of what truth is, because somewhere it's in between. Just looking at the history of thought, I mean, going back to the very first Greek philosophers who asked, the big questions, example being, Heraclitus is an awesome starting point, and I'm sure we'll come back to this in future sessions. But between, as one of the ancient Greek philosophers who had an idea about the one and the many, and he said, well, reasoning according to the logos, he said, it's wise to believe that everything is one. But then you have other ancient Greek philosophers like Democritus, and Democritus said, well, everything is atoms in the end. It's just atoms in the void. And so you had from the very beginning of human attempts to understand the deepest questions, very different conceptions. Is everything one in the end, or is everything many in the end? And over the whole history of human thought, with like the combined efforts of the brightest people, we still haven't answered that question. And so and that's just one of the many fundamental questions raised by the ancient Greeks, for none of which we have a resolution. It's almost as though whatever ultimate reality is, it is so designed so that it can't be categorized or pigeonholed into one single declarative statement. I think it was Niels Bohr, one of the architects of quantum mechanics, who said something like, it's a characteristic of the deepest truths that their opposites are equally true. And this is true in quantum mechanics, where you can have, as everyone has heard at some level, you can formulate a system in terms of, and understand it in terms of particles and interactions, or you could take that same system and formulate it and observe it and understand it in terms of waves. And particles and waves these are just two, orthogonal representations of reality. They can't both simultaneously be true. And if that's true of the most fundamental elements of reality, as far as our physical understanding of the world is concerned, could it not also be true in regard to other truths, other meaningful statements that we can make as humans in the world? Are there complementary perspectives? Maybe not an infinite number of equal perspectives. It's not 7 billion opinions, but maybe there's, a few, maybe that's just two, maybe things tend to resolve into polarities. And we see this, or dualities, and we see this in very fundamentally in the structure of the physical universe. So many, space and time and matter and energy and so forth. Things tend to resolve into complementary pairs. And maybe that has something to do with the truths that we're trying to reach. It's not that it's not that we're ever going to get at, the correct way of understanding something, but because the opposite way of understanding is, there's probably something to that as well.
I think it's very interesting that you talk about polarized ideas and dichotomies, and it's also a little bit funny because our podcast is called Athens and Jerusalem, and to many that's a dichotomy, and so then it's very important for us to try to explain that we will try to build different kind of bridges, or maybe there are no need for any bridges either, because maybe the gap is just something we have constructed in our language. So that I think that's yeah, Cameron.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I was just thinking the same thought that, in a way now the circle is closing. We're coming back to this, to the very idea of this series of podcasts bringing Athens and Jerusalem together. And I think one thing that seems to me to be um, of some interest is that it looks like, yes, I mean, definitely, I think we have come to an age of maturity of human thought where things that formerly seemed to be irreconcilable dichotomies can be now seen as complementary totalities. And thinking of Athens and Jerusalem, I've been reflecting that if we take the scientific rational approach alone without the complementary perspectives of existential and ethical points of view, then we actually end up in a world that is not rational. I mean, if you look at the world that we are living in today, is it rational? I mean, is it rational that we kill each other? Is it rational that there's injustice? Is it rational that we are destroying our environment? I mean, obviously not. On the other hand, if you take existential, spiritual, or religious systems and separate them from a rational perspective, then we end up also in systems which actually are not any longer spiritual. I mean, is Talibanism something that is spiritual, that is promoting human flourishing? So I think it's quite obvious that then when we make this kind of a separation, which is really not in the perhaps nature of reality, then we end up with two extremes that are not even what they claim to be. The rationality is not rational, and the spirituality is not spiritual, and they require each other so that both could be what they claim to be, and to be able to sort of make their own contribution. And I think this issue of truth and one truth and many truths has also maybe something to do with the confusing what in philosophy is called ontology and epistemology. I mean, we could perhaps, based on what we know from natural science, say that yes, there isn't some sort of an objective truth, but our possibility of understanding that in some simple and uniform manner is not there. So I think in that sense we can also bring together these ideas of there being some sort of there's an ultimate truth, but never accessible in its totality to us human beings. We can only gain approximations of it throughout time.
Is it sufficient for us to believe, is it sufficient for us, culturally, psychologically, to believe as with the scientists that we don't have access to ultimate truth, that all we have are successive approximations that hopefully are trending in the direction of better and better approximations, but that we're never actually touching upon the truth itself? That's something that a scientist is comfortable with. Is that something, if we think, in terms of social engineering or what have you, do people in general need to believe that they are accessing the ultimate reality of things, or can we, can we believe that ultimately what we really have are just is just, say, a subway map? And that subway map is getting us from point A to point B in the human world. But we really don't know anything from the subway map about the underlying terrain of the city. It's only telling us something about navigating that city, but not telling us about the contours of the city itself. As someone with a science background, I'm perfectly comfortable with that idea and letting go of any claim to sort of contact with ultimate reality. But I wonder if that's a workable way forward. generally, if people need to believe that that they have more than that.
And I guess, well, I mean, we need to probably gradually start sort of wrapping this up. But I think that if we go back to the issue of young people and education and schools, I think it's very much also the question of how do people see themselves in relationship to this, underground system. Like, okay, so here we have some sort of a map of reality, but how does that touch my life? What's my place in all of this, and how does that sort of bring meaning and purpose to my life? And I think this is where we need to perhaps in future episodes talk more about how we can bring these philosophical perspectives to bear on the everyday work of schools, and how can we, and not just, of course, schools as such, but I mean, how can we prepare the young generation for this new world that has, as you said, Stephen, I mean, it's been in the making, but still, I think that the way that it has taken form now during the past couple of 100 years, and perhaps even more so during the past 50 years, it's something very, very special, and it seems like we're at a sort of a critical point of transition, or even what in physical science is called a bifurcation point. We've come to a point where we really cannot carry on any longer on the same trajectory that has carried us so far, and that we are now going on, and trying to continue this trajectory will, as we can see now, result in greater and greater catastrophes and suffering. So somehow we need to prepare the young generation to not just to adapt to the world that we have created, but to transform it, and that's, I think, where they will need to be able to bring together Athens and Jerusalem. So maybe these are some of the questions and issues that we can discuss further in future episodes.
Yeah, that brings us back a bit to some of the themes we were touching on earlier. This, this draining of meaning out of the world that somehow has to be restored. And if, according to our current scientific conception of the world, we are just collections of cells with, electrical impulses, running between them, and if that's the end of it, then maybe that's part of the psychological crisis of the present day, which brings us to, well, what are we? Are we just physical cells, collections of cells, or is there something within? And we didn't take debate earlier when the subject of spirit and soul came up, but we're gonna, I'm sure, get deeply into this. Is there a soul, and what is the nature of that soul? Right. And there's so many different directions one can go with this, but just to throw out one possible direction, if we see, as Kant did, that the world that is accessible to us purely is the appearances of things, which we organize by through our minds, but which leaves us no contact with the things in themselves, this invisible realm of capital T truth, capital R reality out there, which none of us have access to, but it's just this ever-shifting world of appearances, from which we construct these maps of meaning. Is that the best we can do? Or perhaps, and this is an idea that Schopenhauer had, and he was a direct successor to Kant, and Schopenhauer's intuition was, well, maybe we do have access to the things in themselves. Maybe we do have access to that ground truth layer of things, because ultimately the thing in itself is what he called will, and what we might call spirit, just translating that word into other language, or consciousness. Perhaps that the thing in itself is actually within all of us, which gives us the potential to make contact with reality. We are the thing in itself. We are the Kantian noumenon, the thing in itself. And by virtue of each of us carrying within us a spark of that universal will, perhaps an ocean of which we are the waves and drops, by participating in that universal will, which is the ground of all things, we can come into closer harmony with it, both with it and with each other, recognizing within each of us that we all are instantiations of that will, of that spirit, of that consciousness. We have a lot of different words we can bring into that. Can we do this in a scientific sense? Can we do this in a way that doesn't also bring in through the back door all sorts of, superstitions and woo-woo nonsense that there's always a temptation of bringing that in along with. Can we do this in a way that maintains the structure of the world as we understand it, and doesn't violate what we understand of the world scientifically, but which can bring back in the idea of a consciousness-centered world. The great American physicist John Wheeler said that, and in connecting the concept of quantum mechanics, he says we live in a participatory universe. This is a universe that exists partly by virtue of the fact that we are in it as conscious observers, just making measurements, observing it, interacting. That's partly what makes the universe not just a bunch of separate atoms going about their own, charting their own paths, but that makes it an interconnected whole. And somehow I think in that direction lies a new understanding of spirit. An understanding of spirit that doesn't have to be tied to these sort of ancient and outdated and outmoded spiritual narratives, but and which can be part of even an educational curriculum, I think.
Yeah.
But there's so much to talk about.
I think one of the problem with these questions in education is that there's a possibility that we could transform the youth, and this idea of transforming, that's something that is is not politically correct to have these ideas. But I think young students is in a transformation age. They are transforming themselves, and I think it's necessary for them to have these kind of questions. So and I think one of the problem with the Enlightenment project was that in many ways it removed human from the world and from the universe, and Kant was one of those. Immanuel Kant was one of those thinkers that made a huge separation between the subject and the object, between human and the world. And I think that was one of the I think that's something where we need to remove that distinction, because we are already in the world. And I think that's extremely important for young people to understand that this. We are not on a subway. Just I think we are all in the same train in many ways. But then we could ask. Maybe we can think that there are smaller trains in the in one huge train that is actually the world.
And talking about Kant, I think what has happened in the world, even maybe worse than the separation of subject and object, is that humans who I think, because I think that was I consider that one of the great insights of Immanuel Kant, that human beings should always be, anyway, subjects. I mean, they should never be objectified. And today what we have done is that we have created a world where certain material values have become the subject, and human beings have become objects. And this is something that young people feel on many different levels. They realize, for instance, when they come to school, that the school is not for them. They are there for the sake of the school. I remember one student once said this when I was visiting their class, said that nobody in this school is interested in my dreams. My teachers only see me as some sort of a bank of grades. And so, yes, I think this is also something where we need to help the young generation and the world in general to see that everything that we have in this world has to be for the sake of human beings, for the sake of human flourishing. And as Stephen was saying, of course, we have to then ask what is really a human being and what are those aspects of us that. But right now, I think young people have become very much like in the past, Inca cultures, where they used to offer their youngest and fairest people to sort of satisfy the gods, and this is what we're doing. We're offering our youngest and our future hope for satisfying the gods of materialism, and that perhaps has changed. Okay, anyway,
no, but
lots of things to discuss next time.
Yeah, so I would say that we have I think we have pinpointed a lot of different kind of questions and thoughts that we are gonna present further on in new episodes. So I think we should say goodbye for this time, and then we. So I hope to also of course, to talk more with both of you and to have new episodes on the program. So thanks.
Looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Athens and Jerusalem, created by Cameron Namdar, Stephen Phelps, and Knut Ove Essay. Nora Juel is the broadcast voice and technical support. Music is pieces of Edvard Grieg's Morning Mood. The voices in the intro are Viktor Frankl, interview with Robert Oppenheimer, and Pope John Paul II. Thank you for listening, and please check out another episode.